Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are talking about the Boston Celtics, our 2024 NBA champions, and a little bit of maybe what the NBA landscape looks like for the Celtics now that they have secured uh, their 18th championship in their franchise history. So, the Celtics are champions. They closed out the series in 5 games, winning it 4-1. As you can tell from the series score, this was a pretty one-sided series. It certainly had its competitive moments, competitive stretches through those 5 games, but for the vast majority of the series, it was pretty clear that the Celtics were the better of the two teams and that they were the team largely in control across 4 of the 5 games, right? Other than the one game the Mavs won where they just kind of blew Boston out. So at this point, we've been over the stats for the series and the teams multiple times. I'm not going to spend too long on that. The Celtics played to the same game plan they've been playing to pretty much throughout the entirety of this playoff run. Meanwhile, for Dallas, they didn't really manage to shut down any member of the Celtics core, right? Among their top 3 or 4 players. They did exceptionally little to mitigate the Celtics' 3-point shooting, and the defensive effort across the board for the whole team, but especially for star players like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, was inconsistent, I would say, right? There were very clearly moments where Dallas was sort of focused and locked in on the defensive end, but also a lot of moments, especially once they started falling behind in the series, where they clearly could not be really bothered to try on every single possession. It kind of showed. So, to massively oversimplify, the Celtics played like a team that clearly wanted a championship, and the Mavs played like a team that had expended a lot of effort to make it to the finals and was kind of just hoping for a championship to kind of happen to them, right? The Celtics, I mean, had a goal and they were pushing for it. We didn't always see that same level from the Mavs. I'm not going to sit here and psychoanalyze the players or the coaches because I'm very clearly not qualified to do so. But it is hard to argue if you watch over the tape, if you watch the games again, or if you saw them live. It's hard to argue that there weren't vastly different levels of effort and subsequently vastly different levels of quality in the play between the two teams for most of the series. So, the Celtics are champions, right? What I want to talk about here specifically are sort of 2 narratives around this team. One that I personally like and think should be focused on by fans, by media, by talking heads, etc. And another that is kind of not so great. Frankly, I find it a little bit dumb as a narrative. So we're going to talk about the 2. We'll start with the sort of more negative aspect of it, the narrative that I don't really support much here. And that narrative is that the Celtics weren't quote unquote challenged in this championship run, right? This is a narrative and a viewpoint that started popping up, especially in the playoffs, and began to take on a little bit more traction as it became more and more clear that the Celtics were truly pushing for a championship. And the idea that some people hold here is that the Celtics' path to this championship was an easy one, right? That they weren't challenged in the way that some teams in the past have been. Most of the time, this involves pointing to the matchups they had in the playoffs and pointing out players on those opposing teams who were unavailable, right? So in the case of the first round against Miami, people talk about the fact that the Heat really didn't have Jimmy Butler. In the second round against Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell played only 3 of 5 games. Jared Allen basically missed that whole series. And in the conference finals, the Pacers were playing without Tyrese Halliburton for basically half of what ended up being a sweep. So they point to these injuries on the Celtics opponents and basically claim, Boston had an easier path than they should have. in terms of pointing out star players who did not play, those points are technically correct, right? But they also come across as mostly irrelevant, right? If Boston had struggled in any way against these previous opponents in these series, then maybe these arguments would be a little bit more convincing, right? If it had taken the Celtics, 6 games, 7 games to get past a Miami squad without Jimmy Butler, then maybe you start wondering if his presence could have changed that. But frankly, that didn't happen. The Celtics had very few issues, if any, right? They dropped 2 games in the entirety of the Eastern Conference bracket, so it's harder to make that argument. Now, are the Heat with Jimmy Butler instead of without him, the Cavaliers with Jared Allen, the Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton for the full series, are they better teams? Do they stand a better chance? Almost certainly. But do you think it moves the needle enough, considering the way that the Celtics played, considering how one-sided all of these series were? I don't really know that it matters enough. And the simple fact remains, those players were not available, right? If they had played up against a different team that wasn't the Celtics, Miami still would not have Jimmy Butler. The Cavs still would not have Jared Allen, right? Tyrese Halliburton would still miss half the series in the Eastern Conference Finals. So that's part of the reason why it feels irrelevant, is that it's all theoretical, it's all hypothetical, so none of it really transfers to anything that you can really quantify. Which leads me into the second part, the perhaps even dumber part of this narrative, where sometimes people focus not on the teams the Celtics played, but the teams that they didn't play or the teams that they could have played, right? In this instance, people will point to the 76ers having only just gotten Joel Embiid back for the start of the playoffs and maybe being hindered by that. Teams like the New York Knicks, who were missing players like Julius Randle. They had banged up guys like Brunson and OG Anunoby, who clearly were playing, or in some cases for Anunoby not playing, through some of these injuries. They look at the Bucks, who had injuries to Damian Lillard and basically no Giannis in their lineup whatsoever. And they hold that up as something to consider, that if these teams had been, fully healthy or fully had time, in Philly's case, to bring Joel Embiid back and get him up to speed in the regular season, that Boston may have faced tougher opponents. And again, maybe those points are true hypothetically speaking, but that makes it even more irrelevant than the previous point. Boston has no control over the health of their actual or potential opponents here. They play the team in front of them, and that's exactly what they did. They played the teams that were put in front of them. They won handily against any and all challengers. I don't really think you can ask much more from them on that front, right? So trying to throw out all these hypotheticals, all these theoretical scenarios, and then attempting to turn a theoretical matchup into something that can detract from the events that actually happened doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's just people honestly trying to sort of nitpick and find flaws for the Celtics in a season where they really did not show too many weaknesses, and I don't really support it. It seems kind of petty, seems kind of dumb. But that brings me to the more positive aspect here, the other narrative that I think that we should be talking about a lot more, and that's the fact that this Celtics team recognized an opportunity in front of it and was willing to take a risk to chase that opportunity, and that risk paid off for them, right? You look at Tatum and Brown. They had become bona fide stars, right? I really don't think you could argue that they're two of the sort of faces of the league at this point, but they couldn't get over the hump. Despite multiple deep runs into the playoffs, they had made it to the second round, the conference finals, the NBA finals that year that they lost to the Warriors, but they didn't quite have enough. The team around them, their own leadership, their own stats, what have you, whatever it was, they could not get all the way to the top of the mountain, so the organization decides to take a chance. They're going to capitalize on a window of opportunity here because they're not sure how long that window is going to stay open. They sent out some fan favorite players to do so, right? They got rid of guys that I'm sure a lot of Boston fans at first were very upset that were sort of sent away. But they revamped the roster. They're willing to spend the money and, in some cases, the draft capital to get guys like Porzingis, like Holiday, right? They still have the supporting cast. They get Derek White. They keep Al Horford, right? They take chances on guys that end up working out for them, but at the time were kind of risky maneuvers. And in the end, a team that had fallen short multiple times, despite having superstar players, despite being in one of the most storied NBA cities, they had fallen short. But they were willing to take a big risk to push for a title, and they got that title. And the thing is, that is the kind of risk, that is the kind of move that we say we want to see more teams do. We get frustrated when we see teams pack it in at the All-Star break, right? Like for the last couple of years, to name a couple, teams like Charlotte, teams like Detroit, teams like the Washington Wizards, who Porzingis just came from. We see them just kind of punt the season, and frankly, we don't like seeing it. And of course we don't, because it means that the product on the court is not really great when you have that many teams just kind of giving up that early. We say we want more teams to try and push to be competitive, and here in the Celtics, you see the ultimate sort of end point of that logic. If fans want to see teams go for it, the Celtics went for it. They did everything. They moved heaven and earth to get the guys they needed to get to go compete for a title and win it. So I think that's the narrative that we should be focusing on, because it's what we say we want teams to do, and here we have a team that did it. So we should be praising the team that did the thing that we all claim we want to see well, not all. A lot of us claim we want to see teams doing. Now, will the Celtics team have staying power? Will they be able to establish some sort of dynasty that can last? Although I don't really like talking about that term dynasty when we're only talking about a 2 to 3 year window, but you know, whatever. Who knows? And perhaps more importantly, who cares, right? For now, the Boston Celtics are NBA champions. They took a risk, they built a roster to win this year, and it won this year. That's all that really matters for them. That's all that should matter to them. The future will come when it comes. For now, I think the focus should be on the team doing what it set out to do, right? And thoughts on the future can come later. But that's all I got. But what do you think? Do you believe that the Celtics are a team that is going to stick around at the top, right? Are they the favorites to win the championship next year in terms of those odds? Do you think there's some other squad that maybe swoops in and takes the top spot from them in terms of expectations? Or can this team, as it was built, as it's constructed, make another run next season? But either way, please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.